I don't draw a distinction between my life and especially my life as an activist in apartheid South Africa and my academic life. And in many ways, my transition to academic life goes back to my life as an activist in South Africa. I don't think I would have thought, I never thought, let me put it that way, I never thought that I would be an academic. I was involved in a movement, that was in the making, which tried to address what we considered to be a political lull and a gap that was created as a result of the banning of political organizations in South Africa. And that was in 1960. And then, of course, following the banning of the organizations, the leaders went to exile, and some were imprisoned. And say by the mid-60s, right, there was virtually no oppositional organization taking place in South Africa outside those parties that were operating within the apartheid framework in parliament and in the Basel. So, and as a result of that, and of course, in the late 60s, the Black Consciousness Organization emerged, and but in that difficult environment, some of us as youngsters, right, ended up in study groups where we read literature that was not necessarily banned, but literature that exposed us to various forms of darkness. And because at that time we were exploring an alternative to apartheid. And then one of the things that we did with zeal, I think, was a systematic study of Marxist literature. And then we were arrested. So when we were arrested in 1976, and then we put forward this case, that look, our crime, if it is a crime, or if it was a crime, I suppose it was a crime, then our crime was to read.
Yeah, sure.
And to try and understand societies in the world, critiquing, of course, apartheid, and looking at alternatives to apartheid. And our view was that, look, if you're critical of apartheid, then you must be in a position to say, this is what would work, or what can work in South Africa. And then one of the things, that the Judge Munich said, was, and questioned, in fact, was how it would come about that a group of young people who were not students, who were not teachers, would end up reading sort of this kind of material. And his assumption was that we could only read the material because we had ulterior motives. We wanted to overthrow the apartheid states. There was in the suggestion that we would overthrow it violently because they associated Marxism and communism with violence and so on. So it became clear in my mind, where ultimately he's found guilty and sentenced. And now, I spent a total of 5.5 years in prison. And so it came to my mind, that if the only way of understanding what was happening in South Africa, what alternatives could be pursued, if that could be done through being a student, then no, I must study.
Yeah.
And sort of politics, philosophy, and so on. And then upon my release, I was banished, and for 5 years I ran a bookshop. Right. So there's a link there between sort of me, books, and a desire to inform myself, and with a clear sort of understanding that one of the ways in which one can, expand one's mental horizons is through reading. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, to go back to your question, and this, I think this is where sort of activism and academia sort of came together, and I think by the 90s, by the mid-90s, after my master's, I think I was clear in my mind that after my master's and after our democracy, that I would spend most of my time in academia. And I was clear that I wouldn't be involved in party politics. And of course the idea then was to study more, deepen my understanding, but at the same time sort of become involved in training future black academics, which is work that I'm still involved in and very much committed to. When I look at myself, I've never been stuck to one thing. I've moved around. I've allowed my commitment to understanding society and to social change dictate where academically I situate myself. And so it was first accounting. That was not my choice. I liked accounting. I still like it. If I had time, I would go back and study accounting. And then of course, there's philosophy and politics and so on. I thought that, there was more there than in accounting. I couldn't do books in prison. It made sense to do philosophy and think about sort of ideas and politics. So when I sort of received my PhD, I applied for a job at UCT, and in 2004 I started my job at UCT in sociology. But I went to UCT with my project. They were not doing any work on land, on rural, and so on. They were orientated on industrial sociology, right? So I worked, within sort of the Department of Sociology, and I applied for a research chair through the National Research Foundation, the NRF, which I got in 2007. So it started in 2008, and the chair is Land Reform and Democracy in South Africa. Very much based on my work, the rural chiefs, rural democracy, and the broader land reform project. And how did I get to African studies? So again, it's not something that I had planned.
Yeah. I
knew there was a Center for African Studies at UCT, I never thought about it, what to do with it. You see, And I was happy in sociology running this research chair. But one thing that happened, that led to where I am was the death of an eminent South African scholar called Archie Mafeje. And so, the long and short of it is that UCT treated Mafeje badly, and that the fact that they didn't appoint him in the 90s was based on prejudice and perhaps fear that Mafeje would cause problems at UCT, problems of an academic nature, because one of Mafeje's critiques, he devoted his life looking inwardly in his own discipline, anthropology, and critiquing an aspect of anthropology that he called colonial anthropology, right? And I think they knew that if they brought Mafeje there, he would cause problems because he would, in a way, unsettle many scholars at UCT. And the questions he was asking in attacking anthropology, were sort of key to the foundation of UCT as an institution. So he would go for the route. I mean, this is my assumption, and this is based on my analysis of what UCT is and what Mafeje represented. And I couldn't see Mafeje sort of pulling back his punches. I could see Mafeje using the Center for African Studies at UCT to try and open up a discussion on the foundations of UCT and open up our mind about the attack that we often get of UCT, that it is a university that finds itself geographically in Africa, but it is not part of Africa. So if UCT, the administration, and us as academics, if we are serious about these issues, we would use the Mafeje experience as an example, as a departure point to open up discussion about transformation at UCT and so on. And I'm sure that discussion would be of value not only to UCT, but to institutions across the globe. But UCT is not doing that. It hasn't done that. And if anything, in 2010, there was an attempt to close the Center for African Studies. There was an attempt to close the Center for African Studies at a time when the Vice Chancellor came in on a ticket of what he calls Afropolitanism, right? And whatever the term is, it struck me as a recognition on the part of the Vice Chancellor, or the Vice Chancellor, that UCT was under attack, right? Along the lines I suggested earlier, that it was seen as this elite institution finding itself on African soil, but never relating to that context, to where it was physically located. So Afropolitanism, I interpreted that as an attempt to reach out, right? And to convince the world that UCT was not only geographically located on the continent, but it was an integral part of the continent and was playing an important role in transformation processes going on within the continent. So that's what the Vice Chancellor was saying. And I found it ironic that in the institution where the Vice Chancellor was saying that institution would even entertain a notion of closing down a center that would help the Vice Chancellor articulate that vision of Afropolitanism. So from June last year, I was appointed as the director of the Center for African Studies. And there was a chair that was established, a chair of African Studies, the A.C. Jordan chair. So that chair was abandoned by Mahmoud in 1999 when he left. It was empty for 13 years. So in 2012, when I applied and when they appointed me, I was appointed the A.C. Jordan chair of African Studies. And that's where things are. So it's a long story. I didn't think about African Studies, just as I didn't think about philosophy when I was doing accounting, and about economic history when I was doing philosophy, and about sociology when I was doing economic history. It's just a way, it's curiosity, and I think, I'm not jumping from what, there is something that defines me, and that's thirst for, I suppose, knowledge, and the kind of knowledge that would help me understand the society I live in, and equip me about how I can contribute towards social change and transforming society. And of course, my heart, mind, sympathy lies with poor people, and how their lives could be improved, such that we have an egalitarian society.
Thank you very much.